And we are live, so good morning, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are so excited to start off a new year and a new decade with you guys. It's our third day back in operation, so we're thrilled you guys could join us. All month long, we are celebrating Epic Earth. We are highlighting amazing places, amazing people, great creatures, all sorts of really, really neat stuff, which we're thrilled. We've never done this as a theme before, and it's been really exciting. So right now, we are joined by 3 classes from across North America. Before I dive in with our speaker, I want to give them a chance to say hello. So we've got Miss Hudson's grade 4s in St. John's in Newfoundland. Hi, guys. Hey, so nice to have a Newfoundland class. I love it. We've got Miss Leicester's grade 4s in Dover in New Jersey. Hi, guys. Hey, and last but not least, we've got Miss Elliott's grade 7s in Dallas in Texas. Hi, guys. Hey, awesome. Of course, the reason you guys are all joining us is for our speaker. So we are joined live in Siem Reap in Cambodia, like literally down the street from one of the 7 wonders of the world, by Alyssa Loyless. So this is a joint presentation of 3 organizations. Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is obviously presenting it, but we're also partnering with Reach the World, one of our longest lasting partners. And what they do is do long form expedition storytelling. They follow people over the entire run of their trips, sharing pictures, stories, videos, and more. So we're really excited to doing another partnership with them. And secondly, Alyssa is a Fulbright US student program researcher, a third fantastic organization that does amazing educational work all around Canada, the US, and around the world. So we're thrilled to be able to do this joint presentation. And Alyssa's work is space archaeology. What on earth, or not on earth, is literally space archaeology? So it is the blending of high tech, and the most basic of all ways of exploration, walking around, finding out more stuff. We are using high-tech satellite imagery to find new archaeological sites, new remnants of ancient civilizations, and then going live on site to find out more about the ancient cultures and people that made up these amazing places. So I'm really excited about this personally, and I hope you guys are too. Without further ado, thank you so much for joining us, Alyssa, and take it away.
Hi, everyone. Like Jesse said, my name is Alyssa, and I'm a digital or space archaeologist living here in Cambodia for 10 months on a Fulbright grant. I did my undergraduate at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire in anthropology, and then my master's degree at the University of York in England in digital archaeology, and now I'm here in Cambodia on the Fulbright grant. And so I'd like to start off by asking if anyone can tell me what archaeology is.
Yeah, so let's head to Miss Hudson's class. What do you guys think? When you think of archaeology, what jumps to mind?
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, I love it. Anything else specifically? That's a great answer.
Dinosaur pictures.
Dinosaur pictures, yeah, okay. Excellent. How about Miss Elliott's class? What do you guys think? Rocks, okay. We've got rocks, we've got dinosaurs, we've got Indiana Jones. Alyssa, what do you think?
So dinosaurs is paleontology, rocks is geology. Archaeology falls under the umbrella of anthropology, which is the study of people. And so archaeology is specifically the study of the things that people leave behind. And archaeology also often involves excavation, which is digging in the ground to recover material. And it's also the study of ancient cultures and the people who lived in these places specifically. And so archaeology is important not only for the cultures that currently live in these spaces, but also for all of humanity as a whole, so that we can understand how we got to where we are today. And so I'm going to put up a couple pictures of famous archaeological sites to see if you know where they are and what they're called. And so let's see if this screen sharing works.
We can do it together.
We can do it together. Okay. How's that look?
It's loaded. Perfect. It looks great.
Perfect. Okay, so who can tell me what the top left image is?
All right, so Miss Lisa,
what it is and where it is. Top left, this one.
Yeah, so in Dover, what do you guys think? You can say it. The pyramids? Yeah. And where is that? Where are the pyramids located?
The Great Pyramid of Giza.
Yeah. And where? Whereabouts? What country in the world?
Egypt.
Egypt. Awesome.
Perfect. What about top right?
Yeah, you guys can keep going. Go for it.
Colosseum.
Colosseum, where's the Colosseum?
Italy.
Italy. Alyssa, are they right?
Rome, Italy. What about bottom left?
All right, so I'm gonna go to Miss Hudson's class for that one. What do you guys think? Miss Hudson's group. Stonehenge. Where's Stonehenge?
Awesome.
Yeah. England. Wow, we got some good classes.
Salisbury, England. And what about the bottom right?
Yeah, Miss Elliott's group. What do you guys think?
I have no idea.
No idea. Okay. So Alyssa, you'll have to tell us. We're excited.
All right. Well, the bottom right is Angkor Wat in Cambodia, which is actually right down the street from where I'm living right now. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about Cambodia and its amazing temples like this, and a little bit about the research that I'm doing with them. So I'm going to start off by going through a little bit about how I ended up as an archaeologist and how I got to where I am today in Cambodia. And then I'll talk a bit about Cambodia and the archaeological research that I've done here with my team, and then open the floor to any questions that you guys might have for me. So how I got into archaeology is I actually went into my undergrad degree wanting to do astronomy. But then I took this really awesome anthropology class called The Rise and Fall of Ancient Civilizations. And the first class, I just fell in love with the topic and what we were talking about. And so after the first class, I went up to my professor and I asked if she had any research that I could help with. And she said, yeah. And then I started working with her in her lab for a little bit. And then one day she came up to me and asked me if I wanted to go to Teotihuacan, Mexico with her to do an archaeological project with her and a couple other professors and a couple students who were in like grad school. So I was the youngest one on this project. And so I got to go to Mexico, which you see in this slide here, and I got to climb the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan and go in a hot air balloon over the ancient city, and also draw figurines that were over 3,000 years old. And I was just like, wow, this field is incredible. I'm going to stay here forever. And so I fell in love with archaeology in that moment, and then used that as kind of a jumping point to figure out what I wanted to do with it. And so after I got back from Mexico, I met a professor who was doing digital archaeology. And so can anyone guess what digital archaeology is?
All right, we'll go back to Ms. Leacher's class. What do you guys think? Digital archaeology.
Like, so archaeology, but so you study stuff but that are online, pretty much? Like digitally.
Study stuff online, study stuff digitally. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, okay. How about Miss Elliott's group?
Artifacts on a computer.
No,
I didn't quite understand that.
no, that's okay. Miss Hudson's class. What do you guys think? Digital archaeology?
It's when you go explore stuff by yourself.
Yeah.
I think it's when you analyze fossils or do something like that. Take
Yeah,
satellites. I don't know.
Hey, we got satellites, we got analyzing fossils, we got all sorts of stuff.
Awesome. Okay, so archaeology as a science is inherently invasive, which means once you excavate a site, like once you dig into it and pull all the artifacts out of it, you can't put it back together. So as archaeologists, when you do this, you have to do it correctly the first time and record every little detail you find within the excavation. And once you do it, that's it. And so with digital archaeology, it's using techniques to where you don't have to actually break the surface of the earth, and you can figure out new ways to learn about the past without actually doing any excavation. And so digital archaeology incorporates non-invasive techniques so that we can avoid digging as much as possible and keep archaeology where it belongs in its context. And so this includes things like magnetometry, which you can see in the picture here, where you walk across a surface and it sends an electrical pulse under the ground and it tells you if anything's underneath the ground, like a building or a wall. And you can do all of that without even digging. You can just see on the data that there's something under there. And then, so that helps with archaeology because you know exactly where you want to dig if you wanted to dig something up. You don't have to just dig out the whole field and hope that something's underneath it. And so another form of digital archaeology, or what a lot of people call space archaeology, which is what I mainly do, is using remote sensing techniques, so satellite imagery, like someone said, and airborne laser scanning to find archaeological features. And so airborne laser scanning is really cool because it removes the tree cover over a landscape and lets you see all of the archaeology beneath the surface, or beneath the tree canopy. And so on the left, you see a picture of what you'd see like on Google Earth, Google Maps, with a bunch of trees here. You can't really see anything underneath it. And then on the right is an example of airborne laser scanning, where it removes the tree cover. And now you can see there's a whole temple complex under here that we wouldn't have been able to see before. And so with airborne laser scanning, we can use this to map all of these water features and reservoirs and temple complexes, and then compare them spatially to where they are compared to other temples, or where they are compared to big bodies of water and trade routes and all these different things. And so when I learned about digital archaeology and space archaeology, I thought this was so awesome because you could learn so much about a landscape without even having to go to the place where the archaeology is. So I thought that was really cool. And so after graduating from my undergrad, I decided I wanted to go back to school to get my master's in digital archaeology. And at this point, I only knew that I wanted to do digital archaeology, but I didn't know where in the world I wanted to focus my research on. But then someone who went to my undergrad and graduated 7 years before me added me on Instagram. And she had been doing some really cool digital archaeology in Cambodia. And so I decided to send her a DM and asked if we could talk on the phone a little bit about her research, because I wanted to learn about what she was doing. And then at the end of that phone call, she invited me to come to Cambodia with her and do research with her. And so this is her in the top left, this is Sarah Klassen. And then these are some photos from my first experience in Cambodia, which was almost a year ago today. And so that's how I ended up here. And after I visited Cambodia for the first time last year, I received the Fulbright grant to spend 10 months here doing research. So now I'm currently on my 4th month out of 10 living in Cambodia, which is all the way over here. US is over here. Most of you are here. And to get here, you fly all the way across to land in Cambodia. So that's about 20 hours of flying to get to where I am, depending on where you are in the US. For me, it was about 20 hours from California. So it's a long ways away. So Cambodia is known for its big monuments like Angkor Wat, like I showed you before. And it was largely inaccessible to the rest of the world up until a couple decades ago because of a civil war called the Khmer Rouge. And during this period, a lot of these ancient temples were destroyed, along with a lot of the people who were researching them as well. And so while research and new technologies were being used in other parts of the world to study history, very little was being done in Cambodia. And so that's one of the reasons why this research is important, not only to bring awareness of this culture to the world, but also to the Cambodian population who have lost so much. And so my research this year has mostly been focused on Kokher, which is a temple complex about 2 hours northeast from where I am now in Siem Reap. So this is Siem Reap Angkor Wat right here. And then you travel 2 hours by car usually to get to Kokher. And so this is a picture of the main temple in Kokher. Kokher was once an ancient capital of Cambodia, and at its center is a 7-tiered step pyramid that's about 35 meters tall. For context, this is a little stairway on the side of it, and there's little tiny people on top of the temple. That's how big that temple is. It's huge. And so one of our goals, or within the temple complex, which is pretty huge, there have been about 96 temples found, many of which are no longer standing. And so one of our goals for research at Kokher was to document some of these temples and make 3D models of them, which I'll talk about a little more in a second. And so the team I'm working with brings together researchers from all over the world, including Cambodia, Australia, Canada, Brazil, France, the United States. And most of our research here is in digital archaeology. So it's using non-invasive methods for conducting archaeological research. This means instead of excavating and digging into the ground, we're using satellite imagery to map archaeological features. And then we use that mapping to go into the field, figure out where we want to look. And then in the field, we use stuff like ground penetrating radar to see beneath the surface. And then we use drones to survey the temples and document them, and then use that imagery to build 3D models of these temple sites. And so now I'm going to show you a quick minute-ish long video of some of the drone footage we took for 3D modeling. And while you're watching this, I want you to think of some reasons why we would want to document and make 3D models of these temples. And so I'm going to play it now. So this is showing you 4 or 5 of the temples that we went to around the complex. My colleague Michael was flying the drone, and what we would do is try to get every angle of the drone. There's me, Prasad Lake Nang. This is my favorite temple because it's red brick. That temple's very eroded. This one's very eroded. You can see a lot of these have toppled over since they were made. So can anyone tell me why we would even want to document and make 3D models of these temples?
Yeah, how about Miss Hudson's class?
Yes, you would do it because one learn about human history and how people were back in the 70s.
Yeah, we can get a better sense of the history, how people were living back then. Excellent.
Study the shape and
Yeah.
What's happening to the temples?
Yeah.
keep composing.
See how they're changing over time, study the shape. Excellent answers, guys.
Awesome answers. Yeah, that's perfect. So the main reasons we want to do this are for research, for preservation, and for education, basically. So for research, if a model is done well enough, you can do things like measure each individual brick, or zoom in and look at all the detail of like the carvings and the pillars or the doorways, and then use the model to compare it to temples around the world. And then for preservation, while these temples have been standing for 1,000 years or so, that doesn't mean they'll always be around forever. Things like war and erosion and tourists and just time in general affect the preservation of these sites. So digitally preserving them allows for future generations to study them even when they're no longer here in the future. And for education, these sites aren't the easiest to get to. Even Cambodians who live here have trouble getting to it, and many people have never seen them before. And so making them digitally available brings awareness to their existence and can fuel excitement and curiosity to learn about their history. And so I'm going to walk you through kind of the process of making one of these 3D models now. And so the second temple that was shown in that video, Prasad Lek Nang, for making a 3D model, what you do is you use the drone to take pictures of the tall parts way up top where you wouldn't be able to see on the ground. So that's like the entire roof and the upper detail. And then you use just a regular like iPhone or camera to take closer detail of the bricks and the doorways and up close with the temple. And so this turns into hundreds and hundreds of photos of one object that you put into a program. And so I actually made this model last night so that I had something to show you guys. And so this is an example of the first stage of this process. And so if you see in the top left, it says there's 184 cameras. So in this model, that means there's 184 pictures going into making this model. The more pictures, the more detail, the better the model. And so each of these blue squares is where a picture was taken in space. So the program can detect where the camera was when you took the photo. So if you're standing way back there, it knows you were over there. If you were standing way close, it knows exactly where you are in space. And so here's an example of without all the cameras showing. So it first makes a point cloud of the object that you're trying to model. And it shows kind of like a rough image of what your model is going to be like. And then through rendering processes, you get more detailed images of the model. And then, so this is a dense point cloud. It kind of filled in some of the empty gaps there. And with each process, it gets more and more filled in. And then from here, you can do stuff like clean up the model. Like, for example, I wanted to take out this tree because we don't really care about the tree right now. We're just caring about the temple. So I took away the tree. And then now you're left with just the temple. And then with one more rendering process, you have a model of a temple. And so that's kind of the process we go through with modeling all of these temples. I did this one very quickly, so it's kind of wonky in some places, but usually processing a model takes up to anywhere from like 2 hours to 24 hours, depending on how many photos you have and how good your computer is. So this one, unfortunately, only took a couple hours. But yeah, that's what we were doing at CoCare, and we're hoping to do more field work in CoCare in February and maybe do some excavation because now we know where some of the features are underground that we want to focus on. And we're currently trying to sort through all the data that we collected this last December to get it ready to figure out what else we want to look for. And so that's the history of me and my research, and I'll open the floor to any questions.
Super cool. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa. And if you want to come out of screen share, that's fantastic. We've got a bunch of groups watching on YouTube as well. So if you guys want to join in, type in any questions, please do. Just let me know where you're joining from. I'll share any with Alyssa. But yeah, let's kick it off. We'll start going to Dover. If you guys have a question to start, Ms. Leister's class, come on up.
Is CoCare larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza?
No, it is not. Definitely not. But it's very cool to see that all of these cultures all around the world all resorted to making pyramids, which is pretty cool. But Giza is very, very large. CoCare is still pretty big, but I don't think it's anywhere near the size of Giza.
Yeah, so you've
never been to
No, go ahead.
I'm just saying I've never been to Egypt, but I'd really like to see it in person.
One day. You mentioned all these cultures that make pyramids. So you talk about Mexico, Egypt, Cambodia. Are there other places that you know of that have this as a form?
Yeah, we see it everywhere. And I think it's mostly because when you're thinking of building a structure, a pyramid ends up being the most structurally sound. Yeah. And it just makes sense to build big and then smaller at the top. But unlike Giza, the pyramids at CoCare weren't necessarily used as a tomb. So pyramids of Giza were built for the pharaoh to put the pharaoh in and all of his stuff. But CoCare was more a ritual pyramid dedicated to the gods.
Very cool. All right. Thanks, Alyssa. Let's head to Ms. Hudson's group. If you guys have one, come on up. Yeah.
What year did you start doing your research?
Yeah.
So what year?
Yeah, when did you start?
So I didn't know I wanted to do archaeology until I was like 20 years old. So it wasn't something that I grew up always knowing I wanted to do. I always liked history the best in school, like in middle school and high school. History was always very interesting, but like I said, I wanted to go into astronomy when I first started college. And it wasn't until I tried out a bunch of different classes that I found anthropology, and it was just something that felt right and really interesting to explore. And so it wasn't until very late. And that just goes to show that if you're open to change, like so many things can happen, and you just have to be willing to take a leap and try new things. Maybe it might put you in Cambodia.
I love that as a message because it's something that, you know, even by grade 10, you're starting to pick your classes in grade 11 and 12, and then you need to pick your major early on in university. And so many people we work with completely changed their tack in life when they found out about something fascinating. So if you follow your passion, it leads to a lot of great places. Excellent.
Yes, definitely.
All right, Miss Elliott's group, if you guys want to come up, go for it.
What changes and preparations did you have to make before you went to Cambodia so you didn't like offend the people there?
So Alyssa, what preparations did you guys make before you went to Cambodia? Like how does you plan for an expedition like this?
Well, like any new climate, I think from traveling from anywhere to anywhere else, there's a lot of things you need to prepare for, such as exposure to new diseases that you might not be immune to, or new foods that you've never tried, or different quality of water, and so that kind of thing. So in terms of that, there were a lot of like vaccines I had to take or get, which are just standard anyway, and you should be vaccinated or whatever. And then culturally, it's actually very westernized in Cambodia, which was very surprising to me coming to Cambodia. There's a very large French presence, Australian presence, United States presence, especially in Siem Reap. Like everywhere you look, it's very modern, and you sometimes forget that you're even in a foreign country just because how similar it looks to anywhere else. And I actually have a couple pictures that I'll show just of like general life in Cambodia here. So for example, on the left, that's a cafe I go to every day just to work. And it looks like any cute little cafe you'd see in the United States. Here's a picture from one of the markets. Here's a picture from the top of a movie theater that I go to like every week to see the new movies that come out. Like I just saw Star Wars last week and Frozen 2 the week before that. So everything's very accessible, and it's very easy to get accustomed to. But then you see things like there's a very big economic gap in Cambodia. You have people who are very poor and you have people who are very rich. And there's kind of no in between. And you see that a lot when you're traveling from city to city. And so traditionally, a lot of Cambodians live in houses like this on the top right, which are stilted houses. Usually they don't have any windows or doors, and they're built so high because every year during the wet season, the water raises really high. And so they want to avoid their house getting flooded. So everyone builds very high on their houses. And in Cambodia, the climate, it's either hot and wet or hot and dry. There's no winter. And so you're either surrounded by water or not. And a lot of communities in Cambodia are also fishing communities, so they live near the water. And then you go to the city and it's just regular apartment buildings. Like you can see in my apartment, I have a big king size bed and plenty of electricity and Wi-Fi. And on the right, you see, this is one of the other big cities in Cambodia, Phnom Penh. And it's just miles and miles of skyscrapers and apartments. And I took this photo from the top of an apartment building with a infinity pool. And like, so there's so many like different types of lifestyle in Cambodia. But what was a shock to me was how comfortable everything was when I got here. And for my Fulbright grant, I wasn't required to learn the language, and that's because of how Western Cambodia is. Everyone here could speak at least a little bit of English or French or Chinese or Japanese. Like it's a very diverse community where everyone here learns the language of its surrounding countries and the people who influence it. So
very cool. Thanks, Alyssa. It's so funny. We have so many speakers that either talk about how modern places are or how different they are, and you sort of blended both. So that was very cool.
Yeah, got a little bit of both.
All right, we've got a group joining us from Stratford, Ontario, Miss Hearn Smith's class, and they wanted to ask, how old are some of these temples?
So the ones I showed you they're, I think, 9th century, so a little over 1,000 years old. Some of them, like what I first studied last year, those were like 6th, 7th, 8th century, so even older. But there is history of people in Cambodia all the way to prehistoric times. So we found like shell middens and caves of like hunter-gatherers and that kind of thing. And then people started farming rice or cultivating rice like 1st century AD. So there's always been people around Cambodia. And then these big structures started popping up around the 6th century.
Very cool. All right. Let's head back to Dover. If you guys have a second question, come on up.
Did you need to get permission from the government of Cambodia to do research?
Yes. So archaeology is a field where you're always asking for permission from the country you're doing research in. And so, like I said, we're collaborating with a bunch of different countries, but the most important one is Cambodia. And so we make sure that we always have Cambodians involved with our research, that the government's okay with us doing research. We send in really long proposals describing exactly what we're going to be doing when we get to the site, if we're going to be flying drones, what kind of technology we're going to be using. And we have to explain every little detail. And if we step out of line of that, we can get in trouble and risk not being able to do archaeology here anymore. And so it's very important that you get all of the proper permissions from the government in which you're doing research in. And that's an important thing to think about also in the US. Like when you find like an arrowhead on the ground, you're technically not supposed to pick it up. You're supposed to tell someone about its location, and then someone will come do research on it and make sure that it's properly handled and excavated and all of that stuff. And so what we want to try to avoid is people learning about these sites and going and looting them, or like digging a hole trying to find treasure, or doing something like Indiana Jones where you go and take a jewel out of the temple. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to ask permission and have everything lined up to where everyone knows exactly what you're doing, how you're doing it, and why you're doing it.
We don't often cover archaeology, but if you could just elaborate on this a little bit. Like, it's fantastic to hear that there's such a process for getting the permission. But what did we used to do? Like, can you explain a little bit about why this is so in place? And I mean, you're talking about Indiana Jones a bit, but in actuality, can you explain a little bit what happened, what it used to be, without getting too down?
Back in the 60s and 70s, when archaeology was still part of like a colonialistic approach, where like the British people would go explore Egypt or whatever, and they discovered this great city that no one else in the West had seen before. They would go in, and if they saw something interesting, they just take a sledgehammer to it and take it home and then put it on their shelf. And so that's very bad. And archaeology's done a very good job at really coming away from that that process. And so now we want to avoid taking anything out of context, make sure everyone has its own claims to its history. We don't want to take something out of Cambodia and preserve it in the United States where like Cambodian people can't see it anymore. And like, so it's really encouraging a process of collaboration now, rather than like authority of one country over another claiming history as its own.
Excellent. I'm really glad we got that in. All right. Let's head back to St. John's. If you guys have a second question, come on up.
Did you find anything weird in a temple?
Ooh.
So something that would be weird kind of to Americans, but not so weird to Cambodians, is in a lot of temples, they have things called lingas, which are phallic symbols dedicated to Indian gods. And so I don't know if we want to explain that any further, but
We're highlighting male fertility in temples in Cambodia.
Stuff dedicated to fertility, stuff like that. I wouldn't call that weird because I'm an archaeologist and I've seen that a lot, but to some people that might be a little weird.
Yeah.
A lot of cool stuff in the temples is a lot of the temples didn't have a roof on it. It had like a hole at the top, and in the bottom of the temple they would have kind of this platform where when it rained and fell on the platform, it would fall out into different parts of the temple as like a ceremonial process. So it had a lot of these temples have these cool little quirks like that involve like the elements and rainwater and stuff like that. And so that's really cool to uncover and figure out kind of as we go through all of these temples.
Very neat. Thanks, Alyssa. All right, let's head back to Dallas. If you guys have a second question.
Is teamwork like on one of the
Projects that you do when you're working with like
a lot of people and
who's the leader?
So sorry, just to repeat, this is a really weird audio thing with your class. So who's the leader when you do these expeditions? Is that the question? Basically, or?
Yeah, like how important is teamwork when you're working with so many international people, and who takes the lead?
Perfect. Thank you.
So the leader or project leader of the project I'm working on is the woman I showed before, Sarah Klassen. She's kind of in charge of putting all the rolling parts together into one place. But when we're actually in country, we make sure that the Cambodian archaeologists have all of the say in what actually gets done. And so there's a lot of communication between them before arriving in the country. But usually there's one senior archaeologist who kind of organizes like when people are getting there, what they're going to be doing when they're there, and that sort of thing. And so, but once we're on the ground, like there is still a sense of authority, but we're all working together on the same project, trying to reach one goal. So it doesn't feel like you're being like told what to do and that kind of thing. We're all kind of contributing to what we expect to produce out of this research. And so I think teamwork, especially for this team I've been working on now, it just like naturally comes and everyone gets along really well, especially with like the Cambodian and Brazilian and Australian parts of the project too. Everyone just has a really good time.
Excellent. And I want to stress, you mentioned Sarah being 7 years younger than you earlier. I think a lot of people have this idea of scientists as being, you know, when you're leading an expedition, you're an older person, you've been doing this for 30, 40 years, and this isn't the case. So heartening for students that you can get into this field and when you're exploring new things, you can become the leader of expeditions and do these things quickly if you're really good at what you're doing.
Yeah, so Sarah's only 30, 31 years old, and she just finished her PhD at Arizona State. And she's doing some crazy research out here, and she's had so many awesome projects out in Cambodia that I've been so fortunate to tag along to. And I'm hoping to eventually make some of these my own, and we're looking forward to that as well.
Outstanding. I'll pass along another question from Ms. Hearn Smith's class, and that is, what have you learned personally about the ancient culture in Cambodia? Because it can be generally or something that really excites you, however you want to interpret that.
What I've learned is everything I've learned in the last year about Cambodia. Like a year ago, I had no idea where Cambodia was on a map. And I think that I've been so fortunate to just kind of be thrown into this like new culture and kind of just absorb everything about it. That's been so amazing. And what I've learned with the Fulbright especially is how to make friends in a country where you don't even speak the language. And I think it's been so cool meeting all these people my age in Siem Reap who, like, a lot of them don't even know much about their own history of Cambodia because of the Civil War and everything. A lot of that history and knowledge didn't get passed down. And so we're just now starting to reconstruct all of these monuments and really get into the research of what these people were like back then and how they are now and how the similarities are between like modern culture and ancient culture. And so it's really been cool learning all of this with the population as well. It's not something that they already knew and we're trying to get out of them. We're all learning together. And I think that's been such a cool experience to share with the new friends that I've met here. And yeah, so everything I've learned in the last 5 months of being here or of researching Cambodia. And I'm really excited to keep doing this.
Very cool. Well, it's a pretty good place to wrap up actually at the 40-minute mark. So I want to ask one last question, and that is for kids. So you started this presentation with this great thing with various archaeological sites, and all the kids knew them except Angkor Wat. So you've done a great deal of explaining about Cambodia and the temple sites today. How can we encourage kids to go and learn more about this site, about Cambodia, about other amazing places around the world? Where can they go? Where would you guide them?
Well, the first place I would guide them is my YouTube page, because throughout this whole process, I've been documenting what it's like to be in the field for archaeology. I think on YouTube especially, you don't really get any behind the scenes things. You only see like the Indiana Jones or the Tomb Raider, or like the Hollywood films that you would get on TV. And you don't really see what it's like to actually be an archaeologist in the field. So I've been documenting this and kind of just posting like my daily life in the field and kind of like behind the scenes fun that we've had, or how to like make these models of temples and stuff like that. And so I think looking on YouTube especially, there's been some other great videos on there from other people who have documented the site in general. It's also good to get a visual of Cambodia because these structures are so incredible. It's hard to read about them and like visualize what they actually look like. So I think YouTube's a great place to learn about this. Yeah. And just Instagram also, clearly, like I got this opportunity through Instagram, which is insane. And I think this new digital age of the world is so good for networking and really learning about new things. And if you use these platforms like Instagram and YouTube and Facebook in educational ways, there's so much you can learn from them. And so I think just exploring hashtags of Angkor Wat or Cambodia and Siem Reap, you can learn so much just through that. Awesome. This is really cool.
I totally lied. I appreciate that. That's a fantastic answer, Alyssa. But we just got a question in from a group in Marco Polo Junior High in Athens in Greece. And so I wanted to pass along that because we don't often get a Greek classroom coming in. And it's a great question. It's why is studying ancient civilizations important? And it's a question. Yeah, I think it could fill a whole session. Why do you think?
To keep things short and sweet, we are nothing without our past. And I think it's really important to understand those who came before us in order to understand where we're going in the future. And there's so much you can learn from all these ancient cultures and how they interacted with each other and how that led to us Skyping from around the world to a bunch of different people and learning about these cultures this way. So I think it's very important. And that's why it's so important to preserve these histories so that people in the future get the opportunity to learn about them as well. And so it's really important to protect all these cultural sites and make sure that we're treating them with respect and properly and giving credit to these incredible cultures that created them. And yeah, history is very important. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. And that's why I love doing what I do in archaeology, because it's so rewarding.
Well, it shows and your passion is evident and we've had a fantastic time. So I know this is your first session, so how these wrap up is I'm going to demute the microphones of every one of our classes. And so boys and girls, if you guys could get ready to join me in saying a huge thank you to Alyssa for joining us from literally halfway across the world. Miss Hudson's class, Miss Elliott, Miss Lacer's class, you guys are all demuted. Go for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Come on.
Awesome, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining today. We really appreciate it. Do check out Reach the World. Do check out the Fulbright organization. Some really fantastic groups that we partner with for this. Alyssa, that was marvelous. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.